by the way, okay, so anyway, is this clear? Probably not, but it is true. 0, 1. There's a 1, 1 here, you see, and that 1, 1, there's no 1, 1 appearing in any one of these, so you can't have, it couldn't be an L1 that's at the end, it would have to be an L2, there's no 1, 1, so the answer is no. Any questions about that? Is the empty string an L2 star? Well, that's an easy one. The empty string's in every star for anything. If you have this, then you have this, then you have this and this. If you have this, then you have this and this, so you have this. If you just have this, you have this, then you have this, and so on. And then we can define an automaton A sub L cross A sub M. This is a construction where you take two automata and you sort of do their product. And it's going to be K sub L cross K sub M. These are Cartesian products. Sigma sub L. Well, it's going to be sigma sub L and sigma M are the same. So we'll just call that sigma. Because we're assuming their input alphabets are the same. Or we can say that it's the union of them even if we want to. Sigma. I don't know if I specified that in the problem. And then this is, we'll call it just delta, and we'll explain that later. And then you have S sub L cross S, the pair SL and SM. And then F sub L cross F sub M. And in terms of what I'm going to show is the language recognized by A sub L cross A sub M equals L intersect M. So it has the number of states M times N, or how many, what did I say, M and N? M states. I don't remember what it is. Anyway, it has the product L, M. It has the product of the number of states of the two automata. So that's, you can get the number. I don't remember what I said, unfortunately. But anyway, so how does this automaton work? Its states are pairs of states. It really simulates them both together. The states of this product automaton are the pairs of states from each automaton. The input alphabet is the union, and you might as well assume they have the same alphabet. We'll get to delta in a minute, and then the start state is the pair of the two start states, and the accepting states are the pairs of the two accepting states. What delta does is it does two things in parallel. So we say delta of, let's say we have Q, a state Q and R. Say we have a state Q from sigma, from sigma, from K sub L, and a state R from K sub M. It just sort of, the states are pairs. So if you have a state and an input symbol, well, let's say an input symbol, then it's going to be the pair delta L of QA delta R of M of RA. So it just simulates, it does what each automaton would do. So in the first component of the state, it acts like the first automaton would of that state. And the second component acts like what the second automaton would. So it's keeping track of both automata in parallel. And then, so it starts in the pairs and start states of both automata, and then it keeps track of what they're both doing. And then it accepts if and only if you get in the accepting state of the joint automaton, which would be this set, which is the pair. So both components have to be accepting state. So it's simulating both automata in parallel, and only if both automaton would have accepted a string does it accept them. So it accepts the intersection of those two languages. And how many states does it have? Well, it's the Cartesian product, sigma sub L cross sigma sub M. That's K sub L cross. These are the number of states. So it's going to be the product of the number of states. It's going to be M times M. Anyway, it's a neat construction. It's good to know. The same thing for union. How would we modify this construction if we wanted to recognize the union of the two languages? Everything is the same except you have to change the set of accepting states somehow. So how would you do that? When the automaton accepts if either one or the other is accepted. So what do you do to accept accepting states? Maybe nobody's following it that well. You'd have to let the set of accepting states be the pair of states such that either the first or the second state is accepted by the respective automata. Either the first state is accepted by the first automata or the second state. Either the first state is an accepting state of the first automaton or the second state is an accepting state of the second automaton. Anyway, you can mull over this if you want to. Tried to save my blackboard here and it disappeared. Wonder what happened. Oh, I know it's dropped. Here we go. Let's see this. There we go. Okay, our work is the same. All right. Let's talk about whether programming languages are context-free. Now these are and I mentioned this before, but anyway, as you go down on the web page, context-free grammar for Algol 60. Now I don't want to say a lot about this, but I do at least want you to understand the notation, and of course this is hard to read. So let me see how much I can help this. Okay, so what I want to do is just show you the format they use, so you'll understand it. And that is, you have this program here in a double colon equal block vertical bar compound statement. This is really sort of a hidden production in a context-free language. It's a different notation, but it's the same as what we've seen already. And I wonder if there's some way I can, I wish I could write on this. I don't know how I can. But anyway, so program, here we have a left brace and the word program and a right brace. This whole thing here is like a non-terminal. That whole sequence, left, program, right, is just a non-terminal. And then this is like another non-terminal. And then this is like another non-terminal. Now what about this bar here? That's like an or. So if this were, you're saying something like, let's find our blackboard again. We're saying something like, we're writing something like P, Q, bar, R. That's really what that rule is saying. And what it means is you have the two rules, P goes to Q, and P goes to R. And so what it's sort of like is that P goes to Q or R. It's just a compact way of writing several rules in one. So it's a little bit like regular expressions because you have something like an or there. Okay. Then, so then we have a block. It's an unlabeled block or a label. Now this colon, these things that aren't surrounded by braces, these are terminals. So these things actually appear in the language. So that's how they distinguish the terminals and non-terminals. This is called Bacchus-Naur form or Bacchus-normal form or something like that. This is the notation that's frequently used in discussing programming languages. So if you see a paper, computer science paper discussing programming languages, it may have this kind of notation, but it's really a context-free grammar. And then unlabeled block and non-terminal is a blockhead. And again, it's a blockhead or this. And this or means either this or this, but you can have an or sometimes inside of something else. But anyway, semicolon, that's actually in the language. And begin, boldface, those are actually appear in the language. A blockhead begin, or an end. The blocks begin with an end. And so if you look through this, now you can understand the whole thing, what this is. And it's all like this. It talks about blocks, declarations, arrays, procedures, strings, statements, conditional statements, if statements, go-to statements, which they still have, if then, while, for, do, step, until, and so on. Arithmetic expressions, and they have plus and minus, all the arithmetic expressions. And they have somehow, I don't know if they do identifiers here. Decimal numbers, they have decimal numbers, like we talked about that. They have in context-free grammar for decimals. Integers, Boolean expressions, they have the various Boolean operators here. Variables, what the syntax of variables is. Strings, letters, digits, you see all the digits are here. And all these reserved words. So you have everything basically in programming language. It doesn't have all that modern programming languages have, but it basically has the stuff that programming languages have. And yet it's all in context-free grammar, and it's only 1, 2, oops. Let's see how many pages. 2 pages long. Now they are a little bit small type, but still, it's a very brief description of a programming language. It sort of shows you the power of context-free languages. It also shows you that typical programming languages can be expressed as context-free languages. Now, it doesn't cover variable declarations. You declare a variable as something later on you want to make sure it's used that way. It really cannot handle those kinds of things. So you need a symbol table or something for that, but it can express context-free. Programming language is context-free language. Now, is Java context-free? Python has some. There's a sort of these links are just long discussions of this, and there's certain questions about some of these deep questions about whether these languages are context-free, and it's some of the esoteric features of these languages may not be, but basically the language is context-free. If you read these links, you'll see that. And Python and Haskell definitely are not, but it's just the indentation feature. I mean, you know, matching, if you indent something later on, you have to indent the same number of spaces. But keep track of that, you know, indentation and depth of recursion and so on. They're exactly the same space. But if you use a slightly different notation for indentation, the left bracket and right bracket or something, it would be context free, at least that feature. Now the mini Java grammar, the reason I want to show this is that this was a compiler project. I don't remember what year it was. A few years ago, somebody showed me this. Again, don't remember who it was. But it's a very short grammar. I don't know if I can blow it. Okay, here we go. So it uses more regular expression kinds of things to express context-free languages. And again, you can see this notation is a little bit like we saw before. This is a single note. It doesn't have the left and right braces around it, but it's a non-terminal. And this is the arrow. Class declaration is a non-terminal. This whole thing. Now we've got the left and right parentheses and a star. Those are just regular expression notations. They don't actually appear in the grammar. So you have, that just means the whole, I believe the parentheses, I don't think the parentheses are actually, so what this means is just 0 or more class declarations followed by end of file or something like that. So this is just you know how it appears. And class declarations, class ID, and I believe the ID is just means some identifier. And then you have again a non-terminal here, and this like an arrow. And then we have these braces. Now I sort of think the braces actually appear in the language, but this here we have a more complicated regular expression. We have either a field declaration or method declaration. What that means is you can have any number of declarations. Each one can be a field declaration or a method declaration. So the star, these are regular expression ideas. A star we've seen, and the vertical bar is like a union. And of course the concatenation is implicit in context-free languages because when you write something next to something else, that's what it means. So this is very powerful because you're expressing something in just one rule that might take 4 or 5 rules if you had to write it out without these regular expression operators. And now we have this question mark here. And remember, I don't know if we saw this, but in regular expressions in some languages, you can put a question mark after it. That means that expression can either occur or not be there. So if you write a 0 question mark, that means the 0 might be there or it might be gone. So that means this is optional. And that probably just means the return expression. So a method declaration, you have some number of statements and after the declarators, and then a return expression could be there or could be absent. And so you just have all this, and it's similar. And so this is the brief, and then bind off and unoff. Unary operator, binary operator, number. They don't really talk about what they are very much. These are sort of syntactic concepts that are probably defined elsewhere. So you can get a lot into a short, this is only how many pages? It's only 1 page, and it really expresses a lot. So this shows how this shows the value of regular expressions for one thing. It also shows how adding them to context-free grammars, mixing them together, gives a much more powerful notation for describing programming languages. Any questions? All right, now let's see if we can go on to ambiguity. Parse strings. Okay. Oops. Here we go. quirks of the system here. Anyway, you'll need it a lot. Got to work around. All right, so parse trees. Now, we talked about derivations in context-free languages. And they're somewhat cumbersome because every time what a derivation is you have a string and then you replace one non-terminal by something, sequence of terminals and non-terminals. You get another string where just that one replacement is done. Everything else you have to write again. And then you do that again and you keep writing over and over again all these symbols, terminals and non-terminals that haven't been touched. So it's a lot of repeated writing. It's pretty boring to do that. And I gave an example of the arithmetic expression derivation last time, or 1 or 2 times ago, which is here, where you have to do this. Here's what we had to do. You know, you had to write this over and over and over again. And you're just rewriting all kinds of stuff you've written before. It's very tedious. Of course, on the computer, it's just copy and paste, so it makes it easier. But if you write it in tree notation like this, then it's much more, it's much shorter. Now, it actually is, for small examples, it doesn't help much because you have to write these edges, which you didn't have to write before. So for small examples, you lose a little bit. For large examples, it helps because you don't have to rewrite things that haven't changed. So this is the example of parse tree. And so this is an example of a parse tree for a smaller one. This corresponds to this derivation. S goes to SS, to S left, S right, to left, S right, left, S right, to left, S right, to left, right. Sounds like a marching order, doesn't it? So we have, and so this derivation, S replaced by SS, and then S left, S right. So what this first derivation does is it talks about S gets replaced by SS, and then this S, second S, gets replaced by left S right. So it's doing this step, and then this step, and then this step. And then it keeps going. Well, this derivation, S goes to S, S goes to left S, right S. This part is done second. So we can do this one, and then do this one, or this one. So both of them have the same parse tree. So whether you replace the first S or the second S first doesn't change the parse tree. It doesn't really remember or care about the order in which the non-terminals replace. It just cares about ultimately what is each non-terminal replacement. See, this the first non-terminal, the second non-terminal here is replaced by left S right. The first non-terminal eventually is 2, and so this just does it in a different order. So the parse tree abstracts away all the information about the derivation. So anyway, so what is a parse tree? What exactly is in it? You have, just a minute here. You have nodes. These are the points, and so the points would be like this S up here, and this S, and all these things are like that. They're called nodes. And each node has a label. So the S on it, the S up here is not really the node, it's the label of the node. And this S is the label of that node, and this is the label of that node. The topmost node is called the root, that's the S up here. The bottom nodes are called leaves. So the leaves are these nodes that I'm just going through. In a parse tree, the leaves have to be labeled with terminal symbols over the empty string. And that's what they are, left, right, and empty. The root is often labeled with a start symbol, but it's not necessary. It could be labeled with some non-terminal. Anyway, the interior nodes, the leaves, the nodes that are not leaves are labeled with non-terminals. And the leaves are labeled with terminals or the empty string. Now, I suppose you could have a parse tree which just has one node, which is a leaf, and be a terminal. But it wouldn't be, that would hardly have any purpose then. Okay. And then the root, the rule is is that if a node N is labeled with A, has children N1 through Nk from left to right, so the order of the children matters left to right, and they're labeled with A1 through AK, then there has to be a production in the grammar like this. So that means you have to have A can go to A1 through AK. The label of the root has to be able to derive the label of the children in one step. So let's go to our example here. We have and let's get rid of the stuff here. We have the the labels of the children are S and S, and we have an S up here. So there is a rule, S goes to SS in this grammar. I guess it didn't write it here, but there is a rule in the grammar. S goes to, oops, no, it's a single error. S goes to this. There is a rule in the grammar like that. That corresponds to this part here. And this S of the children left to right, labeled left, S right, and an S up here. So there's a rule in the grammar. S goes to left, S right. And then there's a rule S goes to E. So that has to be observed in a parse tree. The parse tree corresponds to a particular context-free grammar, and so the grammar has to have all those productions for the corresponding to the nodes and their children. And finally, the yield of the parse tree is you concatenate the labels of the leaves from left to right. So if we do that, we take the leaves from left to right, concatenate all the labels, which I did before, and we get the yield would be going from left to right. Left, E, right, left, E, right. So that's the yield. Now, but the E's you can take away because that's just concatenating with E. So you get the yield, you get this from the yield. And the yield, if you think about the rules of the parse tree, the yield has to be derivable from the top. If you follow those rules, then you have to be able to derive the yield from top symbol, if it's a start symbol or whatever it is. So it really is a compact way of representing a derivation. To show a parse tree, then you have shown that that yield is derivable from the symbol on the root, which is frequently the start symbol. Okay, so this is what parse trees are. It's a neat way of writing things. Now, people often sort of cheat with them, and so they'll do parse trees like this, which is not a parse tree. They'll have something like S, and then they'll have SS below it. And then they'll have a line like this. People will say. And then they'll have some stuff down below. And they'll call this a parse tree. That's not a parse tree because in a parse tree, every child has to have a line to it from the node up the top. So you'd have to have a line from S to this S and S to this S. Like here we have a line from the S to the left S and a line from S to the right S. There are two lines and the S's are spread out. Now I think the reason that people do this is they're sort of just putting rules on the side. They think of this rule, S goes to SS, and they're just turning it 90 degrees, putting the right hand side here underneath as if we're heavy and swinging down to the bottom. And that's probably why people do that. And maybe there are actually some places where they use this as a notation, but that's not really the notation we're using here. I don't believe it's the correct notation. So remember, that's not a parse tree. And that's not part of a parse tree. Okay, now there are other kinds of derivations that are connected to parse trees in a certain way. There are leftmost and rightmost derivations. In a leftmost derivation, at each step, the leftmost non-terminal is replaced. You see, you have a choice. You're in the middle of derivations. You might have lots of non-terminals. So you have a choice as to which one you replace. Well, you could always choose the leftmost, you could always choose the rightmost, you might always choose the one nearest to the middle or something like that. But the two choices that are pretty noteworthy or more easy to remember, you could always choose the leftmost or always choose the rightmost. If there's only one, it would be both the leftmost and rightmost, so it would get chosen either way. But, so that's the leftmost derivation. If you always choose to replace the leftmost non-terminal, and again, you're assuming that if the non-terminal can't be replaced at all, then it's sort of useless, and you've got a string that can never produce a terminal string, so there's no point in continuing the derivation because you're never going to get rid of that. But anyway, we're assuming that all the non-terminals in the string can be replaced by something. And if that's the case, then you replace the leftmost non-terminal by something. And so if you keep doing that, you get a leftmost derivation, and if you always replace the rightmost non-terminal, you get a rightmost derivation. We indicate these by these symbols. The L above the arrow means that you're always doing a leftmost replacement in that particular step. That means that one step where you're doing a leftmost replacement. R means that particular step you're doing a rightmost replacement. If we put a star like this, that means it's sort of like the Kleene operation, but it's applied to relations. If you sort of think about it, what that means is 0 or more. So this left L star over here means that you are what's on the if this is say this is say alpha, and then that symbol, beta, where we're using this L star there, then, so if this had maybe I better do it like this. So we actually have an L up here, and we have a star over here, a regular star. Anyway, if we have something like this, that means that beta is obtained from alpha by 0 or more leftmost replacements. And if this were an R, that would mean beta is obtained by alpha. Alpha and beta would be strings, and strings of terminals and non-terminals. That would mean beta is obtained from alpha by 0 or more rightmost replacements. So that's leftmost and rightmost derivations. So this is a leftmost derivation in the balanced parenthesis grammar. We have S goes to SS. Now this S is replaced, that's the only one, so it's the leftmost one. Now here the leftmost one is S, and so it gets replaced by this. And now the leftmost one is this S, it gets replaced by the parentheses. Now the only one there is this S, which is left and rightmost. It gets replaced by left S right. The only one there is that, which gets replaced. So you're always replacing the leftmost. And this is similar to the rightmost. Here S is left and rightmost, so you get this. The rightmost is S, it gets replaced by this. And then the rightmost S is here, it gets replaced by that, and so on. You eventually get to the same place, just by doing things in a different order. Okay, so we have parse trees, leftmost derivations, and rightmost derivations, and arbitrary derivations. We have four different notions of how you can derive strings in a context-free grammar. So how do these connect to each other? If mathematicians have 4 ways of doing something, they're going to want to know what the relationship is. Well, in the first place, you can go between derivations and parse trees in the sense that from any derivation, you can construct a parse tree that corresponds to it. And from any parse tree, you can construct a derivation that corresponds to it. In particular, they will derive the same string. So here's an example of that. Let's say we start with a parse tree. So we start with this parse tree. It's probably the one we had up there, and it's the same one. And so we want to construct a derivation from it. What do? Well, you have to start at the top because you have to start with some non-terminal that's at the top, which is the only one. So we somehow want to do this replacement. So we do that here. This S over here is replaced by SS because you have an SS down here. So I want to replace this S by SS. So I do that. So this S goes there, and this S goes there. You see those two S's below the top S go to the top line, and then what's below them goes below them. So this part goes down here, and this part goes up down here. So the two S's move, and everything below them moves as well. So let's get rid of all this stuff here, if I can. So then here, we have these two S's. Now we have a choice which one we want to do. It doesn't matter, either one's going to work. So we take the leftmost one. So this S gets replaced by left S right. And so that becomes left S right in place of this S that was here. This gets replaced by left S right. And the left comes from down here, and this S goes here, and the right comes from here. And then everything below them comes too. Now there's nothing below the left and right parentheses, so it's nothing below these. But the E here is below the middle S, and so that E gets moved over here. Okay, let's see if we can get rid of it. All right, and that just keeps going. So then we have this. Now we do the same thing with the right S. Oops, no, I don't do that yet. This S gets replaced by the E underneath it, so we end up with this. Then this S gets replaced by, let's see, okay, that's just that replacement, we've done that. Then this S gets replaced by left S right, which is here, and the E gets pulled up, and then the S gets replaced by E, so we get this. So just by doing this, sort of doing you take one of the non-terminals on the top line, and replace it by what's below it and pull things up. You just keep doing that, you eventually get a derivation. So that's how we get a derivation from a parse tree. We got a leftmost derivation, but we could have gotten a rightmost derivation just as well by pulling up the other symbol. So from a parse tree, you can get an arbitrary derivation or a leftmost derivation or a rightmost derivation of the same string. Now we can go the other way. From a derivation, we can get a parse tree, which is pretty, just do the reverse. But if you want to do that, you have to start from the right. So suppose we have the derivation already, we want to get the parse tree. Well, you just say, we know that we look at what's over here and we say, what did I do the last step? The last step I did was I replaced S by the empty string. So then I put the empty string below it. Then I say, to get here, what did I do? I replaced this S by left S right to go here. So I just put the left S right down here, and I look and see at the left S right here what's below it, and I move the E. And you just keep doing that. Now I got this, how did I get from here to here? Well, this left S right, the S was replaced by E. So then so this S is replaced by E, so I put the E down here to indicate that this S was replaced by E. And you just keep going, eventually you get a parse tree. So if you have a derivation already, an arbitrary derivation, leftmost, rightmost, anyway, you get a parse tree from it. So this is how you can go between these. So from a parse tree, we can obtain a leftmost or a rightmost derivation. From an arbitrary derivation, we can obtain a parse tree. This gives theorem 3.2.1 in the text, which says, and it tells how all these four concepts are related to each other. And it seems almost obvious. It's one of these things that's so obvious you hardly know what you're supposed to prove. But anyway, let G equal V sigma RS be a context-free grammar. This is terminals and non-terminals, terminals, rules, and start symbol. Let A be in V minus sigma. A is a non-terminal, not necessarily a start symbol. And W in sigma star is a sequence of terminals. The following are equivalent. You can derive W from A by some number of replacements. And there's a parse tree with let's get rid of this. There's a parse tree with root labeled A and yield W. There's a leftmost derivation, and there's a rightmost derivation. So these things are equivalent, namely, and it seems obvious, but if they weren't equivalent, that would be pretty interesting. So you can derive W from A by an arbitrary derivation if and only if you can get it from a leftmost derivation or a rightmost derivation, if and only if there's a parse tree with the root labeled A and yield W. How do we prove that? Well, from a derivation you can construct a parse tree. We showed how to do that. Although, I didn't find an example, but the same idea works better. That shows if you have a derivation, you get a parse tree. So that goes from 1 to 2. And then, from a parse tree, you can construct a leftmost or a rightmost derivation. So if you have a parse tree, you can get a leftmost derivation always by doing the left one, or a rightmost derivation. So we know if there's a derivation in the parse tree, leftmost derivation, rightmost derivation. Now we've got to close the circle. If you have a leftmost derivation, you have a derivation, so that implies that. If you have a rightmost derivation, you have a derivation, that implies that. So wherever you go, you get everything else. If you have this, then you have this, then you have this and this. If you have this, then you have this and this, so you have this. If you just have this, you have this, then you have this, and so on. If you have any one of them, all the implications, and these are logical implications if you remember from 283, then you get everything else. That shows very equivalent. Okay, any questions? Now we want to talk about ambiguity. And the term ambiguity means something has two different meanings. You say something, it could be ambiguous, you don't understand what it is. There is a technical concept of ambiguity for context-free grammars. And it's related to parse trees, you see. We really need parse trees to talk about ambiguity in context-free grammars. You can't do it just by derivations. So that's another reason why we talk about parse trees. Parse trees are useful for compilation because when you compile a context-free language using a grammar, what the compiler does is, it probably does, is convert the program into a parse tree, and then it uses the parse tree to generate code. So if it's ambiguous, if the program is ambiguous, then you wouldn't know what code to generate, it turns out. So we have some sentences in English are ambiguous. For example, fighting tigers can be dangerous, or time flies like an arrow. Now, fighting tigers can be dangerous. So this can be seen in two different ways. In other words, fighting tigers might be a particular kind of tiger that are dangerous. But if a tiger is not a fighting tiger, it's not dangerous at all. You can have them like that. Or it could mean that fighting any kind of a tiger is dangerous. But it doesn't say anything about, there being whenever dangerous. A tiger might not be dangerous or anything like that. It just says that if you have any kind of a tiger, whether it's a fighting tiger or not a fighting tiger, and if you fight it, that's a dangerous thing to do. So that's an ambiguous sentence. Or time flies like an arrow. How many have heard this sentence before, time flies like an arrow? Now somebody told me Groucho Marx said that, but I think it was around quite a while and he just picked it up. What he said is time flies like an arrow, fruit flies like a banana. That'll cause you to puzzle a little bit if you think about it. So, time flies like an arrow. It's really a classical, when I was reading about AI, I read about this and it has many different meanings. But can you somebody tell me at least two different meanings of the sentence, time flies like an arrow? What's the most obvious meaning? The meaning is time goes quickly. Time just flies. You're doing something, it's gone. Time just goes really fast. So it's really, one meaning is time flies like an arrow. Time just goes really fast. That's one meaning. So what's another possible meaning? I'm hearing something very quiet over here. Time fly is a pretty good kind of fly. It likes arrows. So if you ever have a time fly sees an arrow, it will fly next to the arrow. Okay, right. It's sort of ridiculous, but that is a possible meaning of it. There's at least one more meaning, and what would that be if you can think of it? Flies in one direction. Okay, time flies like an arrow. That actually is a little bit ambiguous in terms of the phrase "like an arrow." What does that mean? So that's an interest. There's a really physical, interesting thing that, according to basic physics, time doesn't seem to have a direction in many senses. That's sort of a complicated subject. But anyway, yeah. Okay, so that really is an ambiguity of like an arrow. What I was thinking of is. So there are probably a lot of meanings that we haven't even thought of yet, like this one that I hadn't thought of until now. But what I was thinking of is a command. Here's an investigator, and he has a lazy assistant who really is sluggish about everything. And he's doing an experiment with timing flies, and he wants it to be done quickly. So he's telling his assistant, "I want you to time these flies right away." So he says, "Time flies like an arrow." In other words, do it quickly. That's maybe silly. But anyway, so we've got all kinds of meanings, and there are probably more than this. So this is ambiguity in an informal sense, and humor is often based on ambiguity. And this, I'm surprised whenever I ask my questions as to how few people know the answer. How do you stop an elephant from charging? Is this something everyone knows now? How many know the answer to this? One. I'm really surprised. You know, I'm surprised that the last class never tells the current class anything. When you take away his credit card, we'll see that's how we solve it. So, and why does the student need his homework? Now, this one I found in a newspaper somewhere, and I thought, probably everybody knows this, but it's even sillier than the last one. Is there a hand? The instructor told him it was a piece of cake. And what ended in 1896? Well, the answer is 1895. So, it's just not what you're expecting. And why does the student need his homework? Piece of cake. Well, it's an ambiguous phrase. So this is sort of a fun thing. We could probably go all day doing examples like this. But, and it's just amazing. Our understanding of English is, you could say something ridiculous and it'll be understood as a joke. Somebody asked me once in broad daylight, I said, "How do I know which direction is north?" And I said, "Well, you look at the North Star." And obviously it was a joke because you couldn't see the North Star at all. But, we just understand so well our language that we know when somebody's saying something stupid as a joke. And it's really, well, anyway. So, and computers they're catching up fast. Okay, there's a technical concept of ambiguity for context-free grammars. Now, this is hard to get because there are several concepts here that have to be put together just right. And most students don't quite get it all. What it says, the context-free grammar is ambiguous if there is some string W such that there are two distinct parse trees having S at the root and having yield W. So there are several things we have to put together here just right. It has to be a single string, W, one string, and it has to have two different parse trees for that string, that produce that string. And it's a grammar is ambiguous. You see, you have to get all these things just right. You don't say a language is ambiguous. It's the grammar. It could be a language has more than one grammar. You can have the same language and more than one grammar generating the same language. One of the grammars might be ambiguous and one of the grammars might not be. So you can't say ambiguity is a property of a language, although that's what we want to do. You say a grammar is ambiguous. And it doesn't mean that the string has two different derivations. The string can have two different derivations, but only one parse tree. So you have to remember that it's not derivations, it's parse trees. Or you could say leftmost derivations and rightmost derivations, because it turns out left and rightmost derivations do have a one-to-one correspondence with parse trees. And then the other thing is it's a single string. You know, it's easy to think, well, that means there is a string W1, a string W2, and they have different parse trees. Well, that's not the case. It has to be one string, two parse trees, and it's a grammar. So to get this all together is surprisingly difficult. But for people who come to class, it's probably not as hard. But for people who miss class, they might miss this. Anyway, equivalently, you could say W has two or more leftmost derivations or two or more rightmost derivations. That actually turns out to be the same. So languages are not ambiguous, grammars are. The same string, two different leftmost or rightmost derivations. So here's an example. Now this example is actually interesting because it's another grammar for arithmetic expressions. We gave a complicated one in the last lecture, where we had this grammar here. You know, we have this, and this says expressions, terms, factors, and it really seems so much complicated because you just basically have arithmetic expressions have addition, multiplication. Why do you have to have all this machinery here? Well, the reason is this. If we have the obvious grammar, E is E plus E, E is E times E, E is left, E right, E is ABC, which generates the same language. See, this is an example where the language has two different grammars for it. One is ambiguous and one is not. So this generates the same language, but it is ambiguous because the string A plus B times C can be generated in two different ways and two different parse trees. And we have this one, A plus B times C, or A plus B times. So do you first group the times and then the plus, or first the plus and then the times? By the rules of precedence, you really want to do the multiplication first, you see. So that's what you want this to be understood as. A plus B times C, you do the multiplication first. And these parse trees correspond to how this will be turned into code. What the compiler does is it will generate a parse tree, and then it will generate code. And what will it do here? Well, just roughly speaking, for this it'll say load B, and this node will have the code load B. Code here it'll have the code load into some register, load C into some other register. Here we'll have multiply those two registers, put it in some other register. And here we'll have load A into a register, and here it'll say add what's in those two registers and put it there. So it'll do the multiplication first and then the addition. Here it'll say load A into a register, load B into a register, add them together, put it in another register, load C into a register, and then multiply them and put it in the register. The reason it says multiply is looking down below, it sees that symbol, so it says multiply. Here it looks down and sees the add, so I want to add them. So that's roughly speaking what a compiler does with arithmetic expressions, and basically compilers do things like that with the whole language, and so you generate code. So this is right, you do the multiplication before the addition, but this is wrong. So you really don't want this kind of grammar because you don't know which parse tree the compiler is going to find. That's why you take this grammar instead. It forces the multiplication to be done before the addition. It gives you a parse tree down here where all the multiplications you see are done inside additions. So they get done first. And the addition can be done inside a multiplication, but only if you got parentheses there. So it just does the right thing. So you can see a lot of bright people have been thinking about this for a long time to bring you the programming languages we have today. There actually was ambiguity in a production or a used programming language in the past, and that was Algol 60. And this is if X, then if Y, then Z, else W. this was originally part of Alcohol 60, and I believe Dr. Knuth saw that it was ambiguous. Now, what is the ambiguity here? Which else does the else go? Yeah. So do you want this to be if y, then z else w? If x is true, then all that is generated. Or do you want this to be if x, then if y, then z? Do you just want this to go together? And this else w. So this is one statement. So if x is true, then if y is true, you do z, otherwise you don't do anything. So, what would be an example of, so if x could be true or false, y could be true or false, z and w are true things that get executed. So, x and y, we have four possibilities for whether x is true or false and y is true or false. Which of these possibilities leads to different results in these two interpretations of this statement? Beg pardon? When they're different? So what would be an example? Suppose if x is true and y is false, would that do it? Is that something like that, what do you mean? So what do you want x to be? True. X is true and y is false. So if x is true and y is false, we say if x. Now, so let's do the two interpretations. Oh, come on. Then we say if, my thing just went around the way. All right. Then if y, then z else w. So if we have this interpretation, if x is true, then and y is false, then w is not executed. Yet w is executed. However, if we take the other interpretation, W is still executed, and Z is not executed. So that doesn't seem to distinguish between them. Both of them, it seems like W is executed, Z is not. Well, it might have been, but I might have got it wrong. Because if you have x is true and y is false, then what x is true, so then you have if y, then z else w. So then this is w gets executed. So this is executed. And then, but if we have the other interpretation, then if x then, if y then z, it's still, oh, I see. Okay, you're right, because if x then, if y then z, this gets executed with y is false. Okay, you're right, nothing gets it. So ambiguity, this is ambiguity and how it can lead to problems in compilation. So this is why you have all those braces on your if statements and that kind of thing. To if x then, if x, you might have a brace that tells you where this goes, a brace somehow around this. I guess it would go around here. Anyway, now, so languages are not ambiguous. It's grammars that are ambiguous. However, there is a notion of ambiguity for languages, and it's inherent ambiguity. If you see, the reason, for some cases, what you generally do is you come up with a programming language and you try to find a grammar for it. And when you got the language you want to find an unambiguous grammar for it. So sometimes you can just fiddle with the grammar and make it unambiguous. Sometimes, however, the language is just so structured that every grammar for it is ambiguous. That's called inherent ambiguity. An example of there is an example known. This is inherently ambiguous. You have A's followed by B's followed by C's followed by D's, where you have equal numbers of A's and B's, equal numbers of C's and D's, or you can have A's followed by B's followed by C's followed by D's, where you have B's and C's are equal and A's and D's are two different sets of reductions for these two different parts. And then the strings where you have equal numbers of A's, B's, C's, and D's fall into both patterns, and so they're going to have two derivations. And some bright people have proved that. So this is an example of an inherent ambiguity. So there is a notion of ambiguity for languages, but it's inherent ambiguity. But for grammars, we don't have that. I mean, for ordinary ambiguity, it's not a property of languages but grammars. Now, there are certain patterns that frequently indicate ambiguity, and if I give you examples, these probably might be on there. This is ambiguous. This is ambiguous. Basically, you have an A goes to AA hidden, or an S goes to SS. And it can be hidden various ways. And there can be other symbols, but if you study these, you see. Unfortunately, ambiguity is an undecidable property. You know, we talk about undecidability. Certain things are known to be undecidable, but there's no algorithm for them. You need Turing machines to prove that, but people have developed techniques for showing that certain problems, there's no algorithm for them. And this, unfortunately, ambiguity is one. So there's no general technique, no general ambiguity tester you can apply to a context-free grammar to test if it's ambiguous. But this kind of property does lead to ambiguity. And here's the kind of parse tree you get. S, S, S. And here we get an S, S. And then we get a bunch of A's down here. Then we got to draw lines here. It's really associating the left to right is the problem. So we have this derivation of S. Here we have S goes to SS using this production, S goes to SS using this one, and all these S's go to A's. So this is one derivation of AAA. The other one is just flipping it, you know, over by 180 degrees over the vertical axis, and so then you have this flipping the left and right. Then you have another. You still get AAA because it's symmetric. You know, it's a palindrome. So you're going to get that with the right two A's group instead of the left one. So this is an example of ambiguity. Do you all see how this is ambiguous? So, and let's get to similar things with these. It's just hidden a little bit more if you look at some of these examples. Non-ambiguous. Now, if a grammar is ambiguous, you can always eventually know that just by finding a string that has two parse trees. So, in some sense, you can partially decide if there's a technical term for that. But if the grammar is not ambiguous, there's no general way of proving that. Now, there are special cases you can prove that. An example of a grammar that's not ambiguous is something like this. And to show something's not ambiguous, you just have to say that for every string, there's only one parse tree. And so how do you do that? Well, you just sort of, look at the strings and just show how you can get a parse tree, a single parse tree for every string in the language. You have to, it's no general method, you just have to sort of reason from the particular properties of the grammar. Okay, now the production A goes to AA does not have to cause ambiguity because it could be you can't reach A at all from the start symbol. And it could be even if you could reach it, you cannot reach any terminal string from it. So in order for A goes to AA to cause ambiguity, the A has to be reachable from the start symbol, and the A also has to be able to derive string of terminals. So that A goes to AA was not necessary. Here, you see, those are satisfied because here we have S goes to A, so A is reachable from the start symbol, and A goes to little a, so it derives a terminal string. Well, anyway, I think I'm going to stop there. We've just got a few minutes left. So we've talked about parse trees, leftmost and rightmost derivations, how you get a derivation for a parse tree and vice versa, the equivalence of parse trees, leftmost, rightmost derivations.